It's Red Eye Radio. Gary McNamara and Eric Harley talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, this is Red Eye Radio.
All across America and around the world, we are Red Eye Radio. Good morning. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Well, go figure.
Yeah?
I mean, Democrats not in a good spot right now. All right? If you look at what spot they could be in, probably nobody expected them to be in the spot that they're in right now. Things are tough for the Democrats, right? With Biden and everything else going on.
Yeah.
And with the debate debacle. So, Democrats out there saying, okay, we've got to take the narrative off Biden. We got to move it to something else. We've got to unite around something.
Yeah.
What are we going to unite around? House Democrats launched a united effort to vote against a Republican-backed election bill that would require voters provide proof of citizenship in order to vote. Well, we already know that in almost every poll that's ever been done, at least 70% of Americans believe you ought to be an American citizen to vote.
Yeah.
So with all this going on, what do Democrats decide to unite over? Especially when they're the ones that both sides are talking election integrity, depending whether you win or lose, right?
Yeah, sure.
But in the whole time when election integrity is something that's on the top of everybody's mind, it's like, no, let's vote. Let's make sure we vote and make the point that illegal immigrants should be able to vote or people that are non-citizens should be able to vote in our elections. That's how we unite the party. Okay, go for it.
Yeah.
Why
not?
It's just you just shake your head going, wow, the stupidity continues. Now, what might Democrats do? Here's a proposal. This is a proposal that exists out there right now. It's a work of Rosa Brooks, a Georgetown University law professor who served in the Obama and Clinton administrations and as a volunteer policy advisor to the Biden campaign in 2020, and Ted Dintersmith, a venture capitalist and education philanthropist who was donated to various Democratic campaigns. Semaphore.com had this. They want Biden to flip the script on the current Washington narrative of the Democratic Party in chaos and for the party to see the current period as an opportunity for a reset. In the midst of crisis, we can forge an uplifting path, Dintersmith told Semaphore. The idea goes something like this. According to the memo shared that has been circulated with Democratic donors and bundlers, as well as bundlers, not bunglers, as well as officials within the Biden campaign and administration, Biden would step down as a Democratic nominee in mid-July and announce the new system with the backing of Vice President Harris. Potential candidates would then have a few days to throw their respective hats into the ring. The Democratic Party would then begin a primary sprint in which the 6 candidates who receive the most votes from delegates pledged to run positive-only campaigns in the month leading up to the convention. Means you can't criticize anybody who's running.
No.
Talk about rigged.
Yeah.
The blitz primary would involve weekly forums in which each candidate moderated by cultural icons, Michelle Obama, Oprah, and Taylor Swift are among the names floated in the memo in order to engage voters. The forums and or debates would be moderated by Michelle Obama, Oprah, Taylor Swift, some of the names mentioned. The nominee would ultimately be chosen by the delegates using ranked choice voting before the start of the Chicago convention on August 19th. It would be announced with plenty of fanfare on the third day of the gathering. The memo imagines the nominee unveiled on stage with Biden, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton. According to its authors, the country would be captivated. Donations would pour in, and Biden would be celebrated as a modern George Washington, the proponents argue.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
We can limp to shameful, avoidable democracy ending defeat, or Democrats can make this our finest hour. While we hope for help from the Lord Almighty, the Lord helps those who helps themselves, the memo states. Now, they're going to read that at the convention before or after they boo God.
Yeah, right.
The memo states, alluding to Biden's recent interview with ABC anchor George Stephanopoulos, in which he said only the Lord Almighty could force him from the race. We need to act now. In response, a Biden campaign spokesperson pointed to comments made by the president last week about remaining in the race. I'm not letting one 90-minute debate wipe out 3.5 years of work. I'm staying in the race. I will beat Donald Trump, he said in Wisconsin. So there you go. But that's one of the plans that they're looking at. Now, I think they're being a little bit overly optimistic with a pledge to run only positive campaigns.
Yeah, that might be a stretch. I don't see them being able to sustain that. But quite frankly, everything right now is in such chaos. You just have to consider any idea being floated. Any idea that's actually even implemented along the way is quite often short-lived when it's realized how ineffective or counterproductive it is. And that's exactly what they've been running into. They've been floating everything because we've never been here. And they float all these ideas and try and go and throw anything at the wall to see what sticks. You know, this little scenario, you write it up and, well, here's how we'll do it. And then all of a sudden it just falls flat. It goes nowhere.
And the writer of this article, Morgan Chalfant, wrote this under her view. Democrats are desperate for a way out of the current mess. Concerns about Biden's mental acuity and intra-party fighting about whether he should continue as a nominee have dominated the headlines since the debate. Biden's Friday Stephanopoulos interview did little to quell the angst. This plan looks to chart an optimistic course of action for the party, but probably stands little chance of being implemented. For one, it would require Biden, who has only been digging in, to decide voluntarily to exit the race within days, and it wouldn't automatically make Harris the nominee, instead ushering in a broader field, which could make the party's problems with some key constituencies worse if she's seen as being passed over. It's also hard to see candidates sticking to a positive-only campaign pledge that avoids attacking the competition. Even if they publicly restrain themselves, a competitive race would likely usher in a knife fight of opposition research, leaks, and whispers by their allies in the press and on social media.
Well, that's it. So because what you have to include here is the opportunist in the radical, right? So the radicals, and these are the people who have been very vocal about their anti-Semitism and other radical sentiments that they proudly promote. They don't like Joe Biden. They're not on board for Joe Biden. And so if the party flinches here and starts to make a move, and they're going to, you're going to bring up Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. Well, sorry, these are the old guys of the party. The radicals don't see them, either of those guys, as being the rock stars. Now, of course, you're not trying to convince the radicals. The party would be trying to convince independent voters, and we understand that part of it, but the radicals are seeing the opportunity to move in and say, no, 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 no. That's, again, where the chaos would ensue. And, yes, they're going to be ever present at a convention, or they're going to be ever present at any event between now and November 5th. But they see this as a moment to try and, usher in, I don't know who their choice would be, but usher in change, basically, not just getting Biden out, but getting someone who is more radical in. And the fact is that this does not look like a plan to be a coordinated, peaceful, and positive transition to take them to a victory in November. It's just not going to work.
Well, when you say everybody must be positive, which means you can't attack a candidate, then that means you can't truly have a debate. And if you put this on top of how many Democrats are looking at saying, look, we put Biden in, talk about Republicans and democracy, you had this party basically ensure that Biden would be the nominee without any competition. And now you're trying to do the same thing, that we're truly not going to have any debate on the issues, because you can't have a debate on the issues if you can only be positive. No debate is possible. You can't have a forum. You can't disagree. And so why would you do that? Well, you don't wish to discuss the issues at this time because the American public will then know where you stand. So you just throw out positive propaganda, and that's how you run it, and you make it a popularity contest because, everybody's going to be liberal, but you really aren't running a election in a way where your goal is to ensure that the people know where you stand.
Right.
Which, again, is anti-democracy.
Well, that's it. While the Democratic Party is scrambling, trying to put together a plan, whatever that plan looks like, it is not going to fix the big problem that they have, and which is reality staring the party in the face. And that is the radical ideas and everything else. Plus, when you put this into the mix, when you put this implosion into the mix, it's not a small thing, then the disruption of it has people looking at this saying, well, of course it was going to end this way. When you indoctrinate generation after generation after generation, the way that they did, and then you implement identity politics the way that they did, and these radical ideas the way that they did, and you build up this entire house of cards, of course it's going to come crumbling down because it's not built on a real foundation. We're not talking about, when it comes to the economy, the expansion of wealth and helping people. And we talked about it in 2020 during the primary season. What's the Democratic Party actually promoting? What are they promoting? All they're talking about is punish, punish, punish. We're going to go after. 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 And they ended up in the end going after one guy. And what did they do for you? Well, you see it every day. You see it in the bills that you can't afford to pay. What are they doing for you? The border's wide open. And who knows who's coming across? Anybody and everybody. Hey, there's an app for that. They've got all of these things now in place. And the average person looks at this. And it's not a straw that broke the camel's back. It's a massive hay bale on top of everything else that is broken. And of course, the party was going to implode. And it doesn't matter what they come up with. It doesn't matter who they come up with. It doesn't change the very radical nature of their party and the ideas they want to implement as policy.
Really is amazing. How long every day can you wake up and think, oh, today he'll probably be gone. Oh, no, he's not gone.
Yeah.
How long long does that go on? And it's going to get brutal. If the Biden family sticks together, it's going to get brutal. I do believe, look, they want him gone. The New York Times and the Washington Post don't put out editorials like that.
No.
Unless they believe they have a chance of and of taking him down, unless it's like, okay, his usefulness to us is gone.
Right. Yeah.
Is completely gone.
Yes. Exactly.
And so they want him gone.
Yep.
Not saying that the next choice will be any better, but they just know they can't win with him.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's going to get brutal. Remember, because when you get to a certain point, everyone in the Democratic Party, when you practice identity politics, eventually becomes an oppressor.
Yep. And it's happening.
866-90 Red Eye.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by House Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
Reasonably good news for most crop growing areas regarding drought coverage, according to USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey, who starts with,
by July 2nd, 7% of the U.S. corn crop drought, 9% of the soybean production area.
compared to June 11 totals of 2% of corn production area and 1% of bean growing area in drought.
So not a huge concern yet, but certainly watching the creep of drought into parts of the central and the eastern corn belt.
A mixed bag of drought coverage is found with southern grown crops, with significant increases in cotton and peanut production areas.
One southern crop that has escaped drought to this point is rice. We see that from the conditions, very good at this point in the growing season.
Just 6% of the spring wheat crop is covered in drought as of July 2nd. However, hay and cattle inventory in drought has significantly increased since mid-June. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
We'll be right back with more Red Eye Radio with Eric Harley and Gary McNamara.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Well, two problems with that scenario. First off, you have to get Biden to resign here very, very soon. I mean, talking about the next week, if you're talking mid-July, that's a week from today.
Yeah.
He'd have to be out. You'd have to get Kamala Harris to agree to it.
Right.
To have an open primary.
Right.
And I don't see that. I just don't see that happening. I really think that they're just going to stick to their guns in the family, and you're going to have then the Democrat leadership go to the White House. The growing cry of Democrats, where you're then going to have 100 on board, then everybody in the House, or 95% of the House, 95% of the Democrats in the Senate saying, you've got to go. And if he still won't go, because, again, the angst, the anger will just get greater and greater and greater and greater and greater at Biden, whether they decide to go after Hunter or Jill, whatever. It's going to be vicious. And remember, I mean, one of the articles we read before talked about the fact that, look, people believe that Obama's running the White House. That'd be the last person running the White House because the Bidens can't stand Obama.
Well, again, it's a scenario where there is no good outcome. There really is no good fix here. And there also isn't breaking the defiance of all of the Bidens combined. If you talk about Joe, Jill, and Hunter, you have to break all three of them down. They all have to all three of them have to be, they have to go from the Friday interview with Stephanopoulos, there's no way, to, okay, we're stepping down, Vice President Harris is stepping aside, and we're going to have an open primary within a matter of, a week and a half from that interview on Friday? Because if they're saying mid-July, you've got about 10 days to turn that around, it ain't going to happen.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios.
It's Red Eye Radio. He's Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Download our Red Eye Radio app today. You can listen when and where you choose if you can't listen live overnight. You see those two talk show hosts that basically got their talking point questions when they interviewed Biden?
Yeah, right.
And the one said that couldn't get through all of them. Basically, because the interviews are so short, you couldn't even get through all the questions, and then he would filibuster it. But the one talk show host got fired by the company.
Got fired, yeah. Yeah. How dare you?
Well, are you getting, I have to ask the question, you getting fired for doing that? Because I don't know. Now, again, we're old school, right? Because we're old.
Yeah.
School has nothing to do with
I gave up school a long time ago.
But you and I have done plenty of interviews. Have you ever received the questions?
No.
No.
Nope.
If you received the questions, you would set them aside. You say, no, thanks, we'll ask our own questions.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you can get anybody to ask the questions that you write down. Get Hunter to interview you.
In fact, in fact, when the one time when that precisely didn't happen to me, but this goes back to, I don't know, it has to be 2003, maybe 2004, doing my local show, and Jimmy Carter wanted to come on to promote his Christmas book.
Mm.
And it's like, Gary, any interest? Nah, only if we talk to Middle East, because he was involved in something in some Middle East negotiation. For the life of me, I just can't remember what it was right now. And I knew that on the tour, that's what people, because he was doing the tour on Fox and everything, and they were asking questions on the Middle East.
Mm.
I said, well, okay, we'll touch the book, but I want to ask questions on the Middle East. Okay, fine. So it's time for the interview. And, they call during the commercial break, the Jimmy Carter people. He's on the line, but no questions on the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And my producer's talking to him, and I'm getting ready to go on the air. Said, well, then he doesn't come on the air. Now, we have promoted he's coming on the air. So I simply said, we don't have him on the air yet. We don't have him on the air. Hang on, we're trying to get him on. And then I went through the first segment, and he wasn't on. And they kept talking to him, and finally they said, okay, he'll do it and talk about Israel, whatever, but only for this segment. And because I'd gone so long trying to stall, I had like a minute and a half. I said, well, that's all the time we have, and I cut him off, and people were furious at me. Listeners were furious at me. How dare you treat an ex-president that way?
Mm.
And I had to tell them what happened. Here's what happened. They wouldn't do it, so they're not going on the air. I don't care who it is. But that's where it gets down to the talk show host. The name they believe is bigger than the actual content of the interview.
And it may be with some talk show hosts, I just don't see the point of having somebody on with the questions that they want asked.
No, and they were the same questions for both.
Yeah, exactly.
The exact same questions for both hosts.
Yeah, and to me, that doesn't make any sense at all.
But that, by the way, that's horrible optics.
Yeah.
Again, everything they do, they screw up.
Well, and in the past, you would have had the media, and I don't know about these radio hosts, but if it applies to them, but you would have had the media covering up things like that. It would have been, that may have never been known. But now that everything's out, it's like, okay, there's really no need to defend the Biden presidency anymore unless your last name happens to be Biden. And or
Pierre.
Jean-Pierre. That's because that's where they are. I mean, Karine Jean-Pierre, unless Karine Jean-Pierre wants to go to MSNBC, she might.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
But the fact is that there are a few defenders in the media And when you've lost the Washington Post and the New York Times and you're a liberal president, it's over. It's over. And his defiance is, and we've talked about it since the beginning, it is probably, I don't know, his strongest trait. I'm not saying that in a positive way, but his defiance is everything.
Mm-hmm.
And in all of this, think about this. You're a sitting Democrat president, and you've lost the New York Times and the Washington Post and other major media outlets, and you're not stepping down.
You've lost the elite of liberalism. You've lost MSNBC, and you've lost New York Times and Washington Post.
You want that to be your legacy? And he doesn't care. He doesn't care.
I think he views them, probably, and the family does, as the establishment media that helped that he didn't get it in 2016, and there's always been bitterness.
Well, no, I think that's a very sound theory.
Yeah,
because there is that. There's a reason that the Democratic Party didn't want him to be the nominee in 2016, but I think there is that frustration, and the fact that it was the liberal media, it was the party, and everything else, and I finally got it, and I'll be damned if I'm stepping down now. And I don't expect him to do that. And I think there are a number of Democrats going, well, worst case scenario, I will remain neutral. I'll repeat that line, he's in it to win it, and blah, blah, blah. And then we'll just let Trump beat him, and we'll try and come back in 28.
It's so funny. I'm going through just the headlines here. Real Clear Politics, a ton of editorials and stories out there. Prominent House Democrats call for Biden to exit 2024 race. Jill Biden making a blitz of the South. Second radio host says, given questions ahead of Biden interview, Biden says 2024 race is up to voters, not Democrats. On Capitol Hill, president's physician met with Parkinson's specialist at the White House. Why media went from cover-up to covering Biden's issues. Democrats are running Kamala Harris one way or another. Behind the curtain, unbendable Biden versus breaking Democrats. Time to get used to the idea of President Kamala Harris. And then, why isn't the media talking about Trump's fascism? It's like somebody had to get one.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we got to get one.
Yeah.
There's got to be one on Trump.
Yeah.
One on Trump and fascism.
Well, look, if they hit that wall, because there's no way they're going to start the whole 25th Amendment thing. But if the party hits that wall, the only thing they can do then is just talk about how bad Trump is and just stay on that. It's the only game you've got.
How can you pound, if Biden doesn't leave, how can you pound on him for the next month? And then, well, I guess they can. They're political activists. That's what they do. Well, I'm sorry. I was viewing that in the mirror of journalistic credibility. So
yeah, there's only four of those left.
I apologize for that. Hey, did you see that story came out last week that was in Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, that we can't be producing these large electric vehicles. We can't make a profit on it. We have a $30,000 vehicle we're going to sell here in the next couple of years, but don't expect 300 miles, range on it. American public, you've got to get used to smaller electric vehicles.
In fact, they said that the range would be 18 holes because it's going to be a golf cart.
Wow.
Just stop the insanity.
Well, it's like, I'm just like, so that's how you're framing your business model, that people have to get used to something that they don't want to buy.
Right.
And that's your business
you
model.
Better get used to it. That's
better
their
get
slogan.
used to it.
Ford. You better get used to it. Seriously.
And it's like we can't make a profit on the trucks. It's impossible. And his quote was, "The batteries are $50,000." The batteries for these trucks are $50,000. He said it. I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and I don't know how much they actually are, but he said the batteries are $50,000. And so it's like, no, we need to make tiny little electric vehicles. Everybody needs to drive a golf cart.
I mean, it's not. Yeah, the fact of the matter is, when the demand isn't there, when the people don't, because it doesn't matter what the mandate is. The states and eventually the federal government can mandate the OEMs do this, the dealerships do this. The people have to want it. There has to be a demand for the product.
All right, so I had an off-the-record conversation with someone who I met in the last few weeks.
Okay.
Who runs 5 different dealerships.
Right.
Runs them in New York, by the way.
Yeah.
Not here, but in New
Right.
York.
Mm-hmm.
Great conversation with them. And said, all right, what about EVs? Oh, that's what I got. Oh.
Yeah.
And the story was, because I asked the question, what about the politicians you deal with? Because you know, and they looked at me and said, yeah, I know what you're going to say. This can't work. And they went into talking about, the mandate and how much, if you don't sell, if the OEMs don't sell the EVs, they're going to be charged by the federal government. Something like $20,000 or $30,000 per car they don't sell.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be a fine against the manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
It's insanity.
Yeah.
And I said, do you talk to these politicians? Do they actually know this can't work? And this person said to me, yeah, I was talking to one, this is a state person, who said, yeah, we all know it's not going to work, but they're just too stubborn to back off on it yet. But they know they can't reach that goal, and they know they can't apply those fines.
When the dealerships have to close down, when the OEMs start laying off, when you see all this, by the way, Ford is one of those. We're going to, stop production on this and stop production on that. When their company slogan becomes, when their ad campaign becomes Ford EVs, what are you going to do about it? You can't, you're not going to force that on the marketplace. And the local, whether it's someone from the U.S. House of Representatives or local state legislators that are looking at the situation when the jobs start going to the toilet. That's where things change. When you have these bricks sitting on parking lots, and that's exactly what they'll be, then that's when things will change.
Ford Mini EVs, get used to it.
Get used to it. What are you going to do about it? You don't like it? We don't like it. Nobody likes it.
Nobody likes it.
Nobody likes it.
But you need to learn to like it. You need to buy something you don't want.
You'll learn, or you'll walk.
866-90 Red Eye.
Coming up, more with Gary McNamara and Eric Harley. It's Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. He is Eric Harley, and I'm Gary McNamara. Here's a question. If the Her report came out, would it make anything worse, or is it already as bad as it's going to get on this because of the fact that no matter what Biden does, he can't change it?
I think it's irrelevant now. I think the debate performance is worse than the recording of the interview, So if you think about it, I don't know that it has the same impact that it would have. I just don't think it's going to do any more damage than the than the debate.
And obviously, over the last week, every time he's gone out and spoken, there's been a major gaffe. So he certainly can't do as many were asking. Well, look, what I want you to do is go out and do a 2-hour press conference and take questions and follow up from all the reporters.
Right.
And it's like he can't do that.
He can't do that. Well, and now it's not just Fox News and the Daily Wire or the Daily Caller or Breitbart that's looking for the gaffes on stage.
It's everyone.
It's every media group.
Yep.
Everything that he does in the public is now under a different microscope with them, and that's what changes everything.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.